Welcome to the Mental Toughness Podcast, where we dive into what it takes to have this rock solid mindset to approach life with confidence, focus, with emotional control, and the energy you need to perform your best. We dive in to figure out how do we get from where we're at to where we want to go in every area of life. Now, of course, this is your host, Matt Phillips, and I am so excited to be back with you today because I have an extremely special guest. And we're doing this podcast a little bit differently than some of the ones we've done in the past. You can listen to the podcast, obviously, if you're on the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, any of those, you're listening to my voice right now. You can also head over to YouTube and some other of our social media channels to check out the video. We actually recorded this via Zoom, so you could see, in this case, Mark Allen live and in person. So you can also head over to YouTube and our Facebook channel, Instagram, and LinkedIn, of course, to check out this video. But as I just kind of spoiled it right there, I get to introduce you today to Mark Allen. And for those of you who don't know who Mark Allen is, you need to. And let me give you some insight into who this man is. Mark is a 6-time Ironman triathlon world champion. He rattled off 6 in a row, which is unbelievably amazing. He is an Olympic distance world champion. He holds the longest winning streak in the history of triathlon, 21 straight races, if you can believe that. He was named ESPN's greatest endurance athlete of all time, the greatest American triathlete of all time. Oh my gosh, he's on the Ironman University Advisory Board. He has a fascinating background. Now, as you're going to hear in the interview that I did with Mark, this interview is kind of for selfish reasons, if I'm completely honest. I'm actually running a 50K, my first ultra marathon. And when I heard about Mark, reached out to Mark, I wanted to dive into his mindset as I prepare for this upcoming race. And for you, you may not have a race coming up. You may be facing another challenge in your life. And I will tell you right here and right now that listening to this podcast with Mark, it's going to give you insight that I just blew me away. It changed my perspective on things and helped me prepare for this challenge that I have coming up in my life. It's going to do the same thing for you, no matter what you're facing. I will put links so you can connect with Mark down in the show notes as well, and want you to definitely connect. Head over to proathleteadvantage.com and leave a comment as you listen to this. Mark's websites, he's got 2, markallencoaching.com, markallenspeaking.com. Not only does he train marathoners, triathletes with his coaching, he has a quote on there that they say experience is the greatest teacher, so why not have the teacher with the greatest experience? So obviously he's done it in the triathlon world and marathon world and probably everything in between. But he also goes out and speaks at different organizations. So if your company's looking for a speaker to talk about his strategies and his mindset, go check out markallenspeaking.com. With that, let me please introduce you to the one and only Mark Allen. Well, yeah, I'm so fired up to have you on here, and just so thankful for Ken connecting us and getting to kind of jump into your head a little bit is what I'm most excited about. And I don't think I put in the email, I can't remember or not, but I kind of have a selfish reason for our conversation today, in that I'm running my very first my ultra marathon coming up. And it's a 50K here I live in Denver, so kind of down in Colorado Springs. And so selfishly to jump in your head a little bit because of all the endurance events you've done, I get to learn from you a little bit. So just so appreciative of it. So we won't talk about my 50K the whole time, I promise. Yeah. So what do I eat? What do I run? How much? No, we won't do that.
Yeah.
My business, I don't think you know too much about what I do, but at the end of the day, I work with athletes and I work with business leaders all on mental toughness, on mindset. And I played baseball growing up. I played Division I college baseball. Then I played professionally in Europe's Bundesliga, in their top league for a little bit, and then had a long corporate career until I broke off and started this business. And the one thing that I found that, in athletics and business and literally every area of life is the one differentiator is what's going on in between the ears, right? And again, I don't think it matters the background you come from. So that's what I get to go do every day through coaching and speaking and running workshops and that sort of thing. And, right off the bat, when I look at your history, what you've done, what you've accomplished, what you've been through, what you continue to grow today in your businesses and coaching that you do, the first question I always have out of the gate that I want to ask you is, how do you define mental toughness?
Mental toughness it's not a black or white thing, because it can mean many different things in many different situations. Sometimes mental toughness means that you're able to just get yourself to do that same stuff over and over and over that's very boring and very inglorious, that will lead to those incredible moments. Swimming, cycling, running, as a triathlete, I had to do the same things over and over and over, year after year after year. And so, it can take, I guess you could call it, a certain amount of mental toughness to just manage that stuff that really isn't necessarily exciting, but you can make it meaningful, because that every time you go out and you train, you do the same routes that you've done, hundreds of other times, that you're putting money in the bank for that moment where you will be tested, where you will have a chance to express something that has meaning to you, that has impact on your life and hopefully on other people's lives. Mental toughness can also mean that, when it does get difficult, and any big journey definitely has its challenges. There's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way, if you're going to be doing something that's big and impactful and important, at least for you, and hopefully again for others, that you're not going to have some bumps along the way. You're not going to have some pitfalls. You're not going to maybe find yourself feeling like you're in the middle of a desert with no way out, and you need sustenance and you need to do something, but you can't even figure out what it is you need to do to take that next step. But so that type of mental toughness is that kind of toughness where you just have to keep going no matter what. You just have to move through the difficulty, take that next step, move past the challenge, go to another place within yourself to find a strength that you didn't know that you maybe even had. And then there's a type of mental toughness that I don't think a lot of people talk about. And that's a willingness to just completely surrender to how your journey is unfolding, and to surrender to the challenges in front of you. Like, when I was doing an Ironman, I had my ideal mental game plan, my ideal strategy of how I was going to race. But do you think Ironman ever followed my ideal strategy? There's no way. And so
never once. Yeah.
And so, a lot of times mental toughness means that you actually let go, that you stop trying to control the situation and just figure out how to stay fully engaged in it. And that for me was actually the most potent place to be in whatever it is that I'm doing, because again, I have my ideal A, B, C, D all the way to the finish line or to the achievement of a goal. But all of a sudden I'm completely derailed and over on this side street here, and I need to just surrender and go, okay, this is where it's at. This is what I'm having to deal with. Let me just deal with it and stop worrying about trying to fit it back into my ideal strategy. And in Ironman, as I got older, I think I got much better at that than the other guys. If you're having a difficult moment, and you will have hundreds of them in an Ironman or in any kind of an endurance event, if you're running an ultra run, 30K.
We'll have a chat after I'm done. Yeah.
There's going to be points where you just go, I don't think I can keep going. I don't know what it's going to take, and then your mind starts to chatter, right? Because what's going on isn't matching that picture that you had. And if you can surrender, then you stop putting all that energy into trying to make it look nice and tidy and the way you had hoped. and actually just deal with the day as it's unfolding. And when, for me personally, when I could feel myself do that, all of a sudden I was completely locked back in. And I was just engaged in getting to the next aid station, taking it to the next mile, to the top of the hill, to the next turnaround, or whatever it is. And that, I think, is so important to kind of living what you ask for, you know, and that's also a mental toughness, is setting your goals, having purpose, having meaning in what you're doing. You know, why do you show up at the office every day? You know, what is that is going to have meaning to you? And then once you set that goal, then live what you ask for, even if it means you're going to be pushed way outside of your comfort zone. And that also is a form of mental toughness, is being willing to go into your uncomfortable place. Yes. And just to be good with it and say, okay, I asked for this. Nobody else put me here. So
right.
Let me just deal with it. Let me just do it. Let me get through it. And then when you look back, that's when you just go, that was amazing. That was truly amazing.
So it's interesting lately, because the word, you know, mental toughness, and on my website, I, you know, talk about mental toughness and all that stuff. And I think there's this, and hearing you talk, it made me think of it. I think there's this misconception of toughness is this thing of like, never show weakness, never show fear, you know, nothing gets you down. And even just hearing you talk, I'm starting to shift the way I talk about this. Like, mental toughness is not some, you know, beat your head against the wall, like show no weakness, like, but it's understand where you're at, understand what tools you have available to you. That could be a person, it could be a coach, it could be just you working on your self-talk, right? All these other things that are at our disposal. But shifting that conversation, be like, you're going to have tough moments. You're going to have, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to get angry and get sad and be frustrated. It's also great to be happy and joyful and all that stuff that comes together with it, right? But it's all about, are you seeing it for what it is, to kind of use some of your words? Are you surrendering to the moment? And then how are you just kind of sitting there being like, okay, what action, what can I take right now? Right? Whether it's calling a person or doing whatever. And so, like, shifting this conversation around, like, don't be tough, like show no weakness. It's, hey, we're just focused on action and pivoting and making adjustments. And that's where you start getting, like, mind and body into. Agree, disagree with that? I don't know. It's been a hot topic for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, there was, just for people who don't know, my history in Hawaii at the Ironman World Championship is that I raced it 6 years in a row, could finish second, third, fifth. I could be in the lead halfway through the bike, at the end of the bike, halfway through the marathon with just a few miles to go in the marathon. And I always kept falling apart and was being passed by the eventual winner. Usually it was Dave Scott. And then the next, 1989, he and I had a classic battle, and I ended up winning by 58 seconds, and I went on to win 6 straight Ironman titles. And in those early years, you know, there was one race where I had, with 10 miles to go, I had a 5-minute lead, and I had been pulling away from Dave, who was in second place. And I thought, I have this. There's no way he can close a 5-minute gap in those closing 10 miles, especially because I'd been pulling away from him. And then, unfortunately, my body started to shut down. My stomach stopped absorbing my nutrients. I ran out of gas. I ended up having to walk. And so I was faced with that question of, I asked myself, okay, he will pass me, because if I'm walking, he will close that gap in, you know, less than a mile, right?
Yes.
And so I thought, what do I need to do to make this day a success? And I thought, my body's working at about 20% of its peak capacity right now. It's nowhere near 100%, and it's not going to come back. So what do I need to do? And I thought, I'm going to give 100% of what I have to give in this 20% situation. And so, you know, I would walk as fast as I could walk, and then my energy would come back a little bit, and then I could jog a little bit, and then I'd run out of gas again, and then I'd have to walk.
Mm.
but I gave everything I had, even in that just dismal state that my body was in.
Yes.
I ended up finishing in 5th place, and the top 5 were brought onto the stage at the awards the next night. And I thought, you know what, I didn't win, but I can hold my head high because
Yes.
I know I gave everything I had, even in the moment that was at a 20% peak capacity of what I could have done on another day.
Yes.
And that lesson was so good. And it was part of, I guess, what you would call my mental toughness later, is that no matter where I was on my scale of I'm at 100% of what I know I can do, or maybe 90 or 80, I gave 100% of that situation that I was in. And that helped me get through the tough moments instead of just wallowing in my, oh, I'm not feeling so great feeling, or, conversation that can go on in my head. And you mentioned something else that was real interesting. We all have doubts and fears, and mental toughness isn't about shying away from that stuff, but more embracing it and not letting it hold you back. I have studied a Huichol, a native tradition from Mexico, from the Huichol people down there, taught by Brant Secunda for 30 years now. And one of the sayings that the Huichol say is, they say, be fearless in face of your fears. So in other words, they acknowledge we all have fear. We all have doubts. We all have moments where, we feel a weakness inside of ourselves, but be fearless in face of your fears. Go out there and run that 30K. Go out there and do that Ironman. When you're on the start line, you can have fear, but be fearless in the face of that. Don't let it hold you back. Give everything you have. And when you do that, all of a sudden you have transformed that fear into an engaged action. And then you realize that's all I can do, and what I can do might be more amazing than I ever thought that I could.
I love that. I love that mentality. I was just talking yesterday with a group, and when I, having gone from sports to the corporate world to now like entrepreneur, running my own business, the way I describe entrepreneurship is that you wake up with something in front of your face every day, and it's those fears and doubts and limiting beliefs, right, that you mentioned. And the quicker you can, and I love that saying, be fearless in the face of your fears. It's look at them. Don't ignore them. They're there. Acknowledge them, to your point. Sit with them for a bit, and then decide what can you do with it. Like, be fearless in the face of your fears. I love that.
And I find, athletics and business are similar, and in some ways, we're probably, some people are more comfortable with dealing with difficult moments in sport. Other people are much more comfortable at dealing with difficult moments in business.
Yes.
And so ultimately, what I try to do in any of those situations is just keep checking in throughout my day in business, or when I was training it, and say, am I giving everything I can to the best of my abilities today?
Yes.
And it keeps me from getting into a negative mind space, because I know that a negative mind space isn't helping me out.
Yes.
It's holding me back. It's occupying my energy and my focus, and it's keeping me from giving and engaging and giving 100% of what I have to do on this day. It may not be my best day ever, but who cares? Am I giving the best I can to this situation right now? And, I tell people, you can practice this in the simplest of ways. One of the best quotes that I heard recently is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so you can practice just giving the best you can with something as simple as how you wash the dishes, or how you make your bed in the morning, or do you put your clothes away, or do you just throw them on the ground? Just subtle little cues that tell you I can do everything to the best of my abilities. And then when you get into the bigger, more meaningful, meaty parts of life that do have that take a lot of your time, that you put a lot of time into, then you're sort of patterning in that, no matter what, I'm going to give the best I can on this day in this situation.
Yes. I love that. Well, and I mean, there's so much I want to unpack here. I've got a list of questions, and you just added about 50, and we won't. I won't ask all 50. I promise. But so before I unpack some of the stuff, how did you even decide to start doing Ironmans, like the triathlon world? How did you even? Did the idea just pop in your head one day, and you're like, "This would be fun," or like, take me through, like, what was this? What was the start?
Yeah, that's a great question. In 1982, I was 24 years old. I had graduated college 2 years earlier. I didn't have a career path. I had a degree in biology. I had taken the entrance exams for medical school, and I go, that's not me. I can't do it. And then I was searching. And one Saturday afternoon, I turned on Wide World of Sports, back in the day when everybody would stop Saturdays to see what Jim McKay had to say about something, right?
Yep.
And he was talking about this thing called the Ironman triathlon, which I had never heard of. I didn't know what a triathlon or the Ironman was. And he told the distances: 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike ride, and a marathon, all taking place on the big island of Hawaii on the west side, which is hot and windy and lava strewn. And I thought, how many days is it going to take these people to finish that? I mean, it just sounded so far out of my wheelhouse, because as a kid, I was a swimmer. I started swimming, age group swimming when I was 10, carried it all the way through college. My best events were 100 and 200 backstroke. So in 2 minutes at max, I'm done with my race. And these people are doing this massive thing that was mind blowing. And he said, finally he said, just a reminder, these people started at 7 this morning and they have to finish by midnight, 17 hours later, to be considered an Ironman finisher. And I thought, how? But as I watched those people, seemingly ordinary people, crossing that extraordinary finish line, I was just mesmerized. And about 2 weeks later, I thought, you know what? I want to go there and see if I can be one of those Ironman finishers. And that was what was the initial spark that got me thinking, let me just go and do that thing once and just see if I can cross that finish line.
That's amazing. So this is interesting, because a lot of people have dreams. A lot of people see things and they're like, that'd be incredible. That'd be fun. Whether it's doing a race, I don't know, walking up to somebody to introduce themselves, right, for a date, like starting a business, all these things we dream about. What made you pull the trigger when so many don't do anything and it remains a dream?
There's things that I have seen in my life anyway that have just called me. And there's been no logical reason or no specific outcome that I was searching for that was going to be grand or wondrous. Mm-hmm. But those things that just were calling to me to do it, and I've just gone for it, even when other people are saying, why are you going to do that? Why are you going to go do an Ironman? That's crazy. You should be getting a job. You're 2 years. You should be having a job by now. And I'm like, I have to just keep doing my day job and go do this and see what it is. Mm-hmm. And those things that really call us, I think, are the things that will be our real paths in our life, and I always try to tune in and listen when I have a feeling that I should be doing something, whether it's small or something big or something that I don't even know could be big, and do it, because I know that if there's something that's calling me like that, like the Ironman, there was just something like I have to go there. There was no logical thing. There was certainly no plan to become a professional triathlete, race for 15 years. Right. It was going to be a one-time shot. And I figured, to be honest, that was the biggest stall tactic I could ever do to really deal with
Truth comes out, Mark. Truth comes out. No, yeah.
Train for that. That'll take all your days. And so I try to tune in, and if I feel like it's something, I try to go for it, because a lot of times life only gives us one real chance at a particular calling. It may come back again in another form, another way, but those are the things that really get us going. It was the same with swimming. In 1968, I saw the Mexico City Olympics on television. It was actually the first televised Olympics that I had ever seen.
Wow.
And the events, the two events that just again mesmerized me were the 800-meter free by the women and the 1500-meter free by the men, because these men and women were just going back and forth and back and forth. And for me at that time, as a 10-year-old, I could barely swim one time across a 25-yard pool without having to just stop and rest. And I thought, look at me and look at them. That's just amazing. It had a calling. And shortly after that, it captured me, I should say. And then shortly after that, there was an ad for a magazine in our local newspaper for the local swim team. They were having tryouts. And my mom said, why don't you just go? And so there was part of me that was so fearful, like, I can only swim one time across the pool. Why would I become a swimmer? And then I thought, I have to go there. And this is as a 10-year-old. And so I've had a number of those moments in life. And I think if you tune in, you'll know what they are. And other things, you do it because it's very practical. Sure. Everybody has to have a job, right?
Yes.
So again, surrender to that and go, yeah, okay, I need to have a job and this is what I'm doing. And let me do the best I can with what I know in this job that I have now. Maybe it's not my ultimate dream job, but maybe my ultimate dream job is unrealistic. Have somebody pay me to just be me. Right?
Yes. I haven't gotten that paycheck either. I can't figure that one out. That's wild. No, I appreciate you sharing that. So I love the spark and then go to do it. And I find it's interesting too, because like when I started this business originally, like way back, like a decade ago, it's more of I was doing it on the side, and it was like start small, and then it grew to what it is today. But it's what's one like little thing I can do to start kind of achieving that dream and moving towards it at least. So take me through like your first race compared to maybe like one of the races during that kind of 6-time stretch. I know you won a bunch of other races as well, but that 6 race stretch, what was the difference in mindset between like that, maybe the first couple races or the races where you fell off like towards the end, and then like when you started winning it? What was the shift? Because that's a pretty monumental shift of like when you start running out of gas and all of a sudden you figure it out and it's lights out. And I know it's not lights out because there's ups and downs throughout. So let's be realistic. So, but what was that difference?
That's a great question. In some of those first 6 races where I was in the lead, where I thought I'm going to win this, and then I fell apart, got passed. I was really going there with the purpose to try and win. The very first year that I did it in 1982, I ended up being in the lead with the guy, Dave Scott, who won it that year on the bike ride. Halfway through the bike, and my derailleur actually broke right about that point. So I didn't finish the first time that I was there, but I had been with the best guy in the world at that time for part of the race. And so, I thought maybe I could be kind of good at this. And so it was like, right at that moment, as I had to drop out, but I had been with Dave, who won that year, I thought maybe I can be the champion. And so that became my goal. And each year when I felt that goal slipping away, it just felt like I was slipping into oblivion, and like, death and doom was going to come to my life because I'm not being the Ironman champ.
Yes.
Finally, after 6 years of failing at this goal, I thought, okay, my family and friends, they're saying, look, Mark, don't go back there. There's something about the Ironman that's just not for you. You can win races everywhere else in the world. You can beat the guy that has been winning, Dave Scott, at all of those other races. Forget it. It's too hot. It's too windy. It's too long. There's something about it that's just not for you. And I was, we all have those people that we rely on to tell us the things about ourselves that we're unwilling to see.
Yes.
And I was like this close to saying, you guys are right. But then I just stepped back and I realized there was something that I had just actually never tried to do. And that was to go there and to just have my best race. There is only going to be one person who wins. So does that mean that everybody else is a loser? Absolutely not. So in 1989, as I prepared for my 7th Ironman, that became my goal, to just prepare myself to swim strong, to bike strong, and then to run a strong marathon. Not go easy, but to just give it a very strong, positive effort and have my best race, and then just see what happens. And it was a real shift that one, took a lot of the pressure away, and two, made it so much more meaningful, because it was about bringing the best that I could there. And then, the universe will do with it whatever it wants. And whoever's supposed to be the one that was meant to win is going to win it. And that it was a huge shift. And that was really what enabled me to stick with it in that race, where it was very intense competition. We were side by side for basically 8 hours. Mm-hmm. And the whole time through, I was just like, let me just get the best I can out of this. Let me just get the best I can out of this. There's a lot that went into winning that year, but that was one of the big shifts.
Interesting. So in the years before, because it's kind of like control what you can control, right? And the only thing you can control in that situation, any situation in life, is like the things in front of you, right? So mm-hmm. And you hear people talk about like, don't waste time thinking about what's outside of your control. Great in theory, difficult to do, mm-hmm. right? In those earlier races, were you worried about, what the other racers were doing, focused more on like their strategy, their pace, theirs, and then that shift happened to like my pace, my strategy? Talk me through that.
Yeah, exactly. In the early years, I was looking at Dave Scott and saying, okay, why is he so strong? What is he doing that makes him so unbeatable? And I thought, I need to be like that. And he's somebody for sure that his whole thing was more that mental toughness of just like beat life into submission kind of a thing, Okay. And so I was trying to be like that, and I was trying to embody that kind of energy. And all the other races that I went to, I was just myself, and I have a broader, as I said in the beginning, a broader concept of what mental toughness means. It can mean a number of different things. And so I just would embrace whichever one was needed in the moment. And so anyway, finally in 89, I said, you know what? I am not Dave Scott. I am hardwired different than he is. Mm-hmm. And so let me just embrace the fact that I am not that person. And let me just go there and just be who I am and race the way that I would. And, you're well aware of everybody in the race, of course, and, Sure. And I kind of went in there thinking, I have competed against all these guys before. And sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. Why don't I look at them as people that are, instead of going to win or lose, that they're people who are going to help me elevate my effort and my performance to something that I could never do on my own. So that shifted them from being competitors to cooperative game players in helping me elevate to my highest level. And so, we can look at competition as bad, or we can look at it as, hey, this is just what's going to help me bring out the best that I have. The final year that I won the Ironman was in 1995. I was 37 years old. Nobody had ever won as a 37-year-old at that point. I was trying to win 6 titles and 6 starts, which nobody had done. Yes. And, I went to the Big Island before the race, and I went and had a talk with the island. I said, help me just have one more great race. Mm. It wasn't even about winning. I just wanted to go there and have a great race. And as it turned out, the dynamic of the day turned into something that I had never seen before. I came off the bike 13 and a half minutes behind the leader, who was a 24-year-old athlete named Thomas Hellriegel. Nobody had ever closed a 13 and a half minute gap to become the Ironman champion. And so, on the marathon. And so, when I got off the bike, I thought, I'm having the worst Ironman in my career. It ended up that eventually I was able to chip away at that deficit, and eventually at mile 23 make the final pass of Thomas Hellriegel. I went on to win that 6th title. Wow. And so when I look back, I realized that was my greatest Ironman, because it was so difficult to win it. There were so many moments when I wanted to give up. Brant Secunda, who I mentioned earlier, I'd gone to a number of retreats that he gives throughout the year to really just fortify that internal space, and to have him help me get ready just on an energetic, emotional, spiritual level. And his words kept coming back, like in those early miles of the marathon: be fearless in the face of your fears. He also said, no matter what, take that next step. It's never over until it's over. He said that's a Weichel saying also, meaning no matter how dismal things look for you, take that next step, because you just never know. It might turn around for you. And so I kept doing that, and you know, trying to tune into the island there and saying, hey, you help me here. I'm giving everything I have, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. And, you know, just kept going and kept trying to get back into that champion's mindset, which for me, and you might call this mental toughness, but I think it's a mental space that can help anybody, is to just quiet your mind. You know, when you can get your mind to be quiet, you know, one breath can do it. You know, you're going haywire, negative thoughts are coming in there. Just tell yourself, shut up. Okay, now I'm free to get back into that flow, into that engagement that's so necessary to pull off something amazing. And so, you know, I had so many moments like that where I was ready to quit. I didn't, I kept going. And so that ended up being my greatest Ironman ever. And it wouldn't have happened had I not had this incredible athlete putting in the performance of his life, pushing me to my absolute limit. And so, you know, you just never know, you know, and so I try to suspend judgment in the moment, because when you look back and see what you accomplished in the end, it might have the most meaning to you of anything that you've done. Had you given up, though, had you just sort of stayed with it, you would have never had that experience.
So true. That's powerful. As you're talking about this, I'm going through athletes that I've talked to and read stories about who have had such that similar experience where it's like, stop worrying about what others are doing and focus on how do I show up to be the best athlete, business person, whatever, fill in the blank that I can be. It could be husband, it could be, you know, father, it could be mother, whatever. But how do I show up and play my best game or run my best race that I have at the moment, 100% of what I have at the moment, because that's what's most meaningful. That's so. These other athletes, they've had similar experiences where it's like that's been the switch. That's been the switch to them just going out of control. You've got just crushing it. You've got this quote on your website that I'll read real quick. It's kind of down this vein. It says, "Beating an opponent at their game is tough. Beating them at yours is not." And that really stuck out to me as I was on your website, and it's so, you know, meaningful. Because also the thing is, when you stop worrying about other people, when you start worrying about yourself, they probably start worrying about you more. And you get to play head games with them, right? Was that part of the strategy?
You know, however it affects them when I'm thinking about just giving my best, that's for them to manage, you know. But for sure, you know, that's exactly what I was saying about the shift in 1989. I went from trying to play Dave's game, race his strategy with his form of strength that he had, which wasn't me, and to just race my race and to use him as, you know, in cooperation instead of in competition. And it helped elevate me. You know, that race, he had held the previous world's record going into it. And he ended up having his best Ironman of his career that day. We were together the entire swim, the entire bike ride, the entire marathon, all the way till about 1.5 miles to go. And then on the last long uphill before you drop down into the town of Kona and go to the finish line, I made a break that stuck. And he broke his previous world's record by 17 minutes. And I did my best time on that day by nearly 30. And the difference in our times at the end was a mere 58 seconds, which is a very small margin on a day that takes over 8 hours to complete. And it was just because I was playing my game. And, you know, sometimes people think that it's disempowering to say, I'm just going to do my best. And it is disempowering if that's your excuse to go easier or slower. But it's very empowering if you say, I'm going to do my best, but I'm also going to be completely aware of the world and how my actions are interacting with it. So whether it's saying, okay, my business, I'm just going to do my business, but you tune into what's going on, and that's your motivation. Like that's your conscience to not just get lazy and go, oh, I'm doing my best. You know, I'm having fun. You know, if I went there and went out on the race course and just went the way I was in the mood to go, I would have probably gotten 100th, right? I mean, it's painful.
Yes.
But I'm still using all the other athletes to stay on track. So if you can give your best and use the world to help keep you on track, that's when amazing things will happen.
And that's such a great point. I've never heard it said that way actually before. That whole concept of like, I'm just giving my best. It is, in, I would say, most cases, an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I gave my best. I tried my hardest. And it's to your point, taking that step back and assessing it and being in the moment, be like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I gave full effort? I had a great attitude? Like, however you define that, right? I pushed my limits. I think, oh my gosh, if we could shift the kind of thinking around that phrase, what you just said, that I gave my best, or I'm just going to give my best, and it meant something different, more like squeeze the value out of it, find out what's possible and shift that'd be amazing. I've got 3 young kids, 13, 11, and 7 right now. And I constantly preach, and I'm sure they get annoyed. They get annoyed by a lot that I do, of course, but I preach all the time about, like, when they walk off the court or the ice or whatever, it's, did you give full effort and did you have a great attitude? Because to your point, like, those are the only things you can control. Is that effort and attitude, and kind of leaning in on those a bit more to find out what's possible for you.
You know, it is harder, I think, for kids to get into that space because they are sort of defining themselves in comparison to other people. Mm-hmm. And it took me until I was 31 to actually get to that point where I could say, okay, let me just define myself by what I do and the best that I can give, and not in comparison to other people. So it's a, like you said, it's easy to say, it's hard to implement.
Yes.
It can be hard to implement.
Yes.
And especially for kids, you know, they can be some of the toughest to change that mental space so that they are just out there going, this is just play at its highest level.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yes. Well, that's why I'm going to have my kids listen to this interview to get a perspective other than their fathers. So I'll edit out that part right there that I just said. But anyway, so you ran so many races. I mean, I went through in the intro and talked about, the 21 straight races and the longest winning streak and the 6-time Ironman world champion. I mean, all these, I don't know, just consistency that you've had. How did you, like, after you won an Ironman or won a race and it's another one's coming up, how did you mentally kind of be like, okay, that's done. Now I'm excited again for that next one, or I'm excited again for that next one. How did you keep that kind of, I don't know, enthusiasm? I won't call it motivation. I think motivation is great. It just tends to fade pretty quick. But how did you mentally just kind of move on to the next one and be like, I'm engaged, I'm ready, this is exciting, let's go?
I would let myself sort of cycle through the whole thing. So, I would do Ironman. That was always in October.
Yes.
And then I would let everything come down. I would let my fitness go. I would drop back to let myself really just absorb what had just gone on, to acknowledge what had gone on, whether it was a bad race or a good race. Mm-hmm. I would try to learn what it was that happened out there that I had never known before about myself, about how I managed situations, so that, I tell the athletes that I coach all the time, the only bad race is one you don't learn anything from, and that goes for the races that are your greatest effort and those where you completely fall apart. If you don't learn something from them, then that was a bad race. But if you learn something, that is a great race. And so I didn't immediately jump back and say, okay, I'm ready to go, because I wasn't. And you have to honor that we are human, and that great efforts take a lot of energy and time and focus, and you have to let that settle, and you have to recharge to then relaunch again. And one of the biggest mistakes that athletes make year to year, well, one, they don't give themselves that downtime to recharge, regenerate, let the lessons sink in, let their bodies get ready for another season. But the second thing, that the biggest mistake or maybe it's the biggest mistake that top athletes make, is trying to go back to win the same things again with for the same reasons. And so, what might spark you to go put all of this effort into something, whether it's an athletic event or your work year to year, what got you excited this year may have no meaning to you next year, or there's no luster left in it because you accomplished it.
Yes.
And so each year before I launched into my training, I would just ask myself, what is the reason? Why am I doing this year? What's the vision or the image? What am I trying to bring? What am I trying to get out of it? So that I let that evolve over the course of those 6 wins.
Yes.
And that's actually what kept me going back year to year, because each year it was a slightly different reason that I was going to do all those thousands and thousands of miles of training. Had I tried to just take that thing from the first win and plop it onto all the other 5 after that, I may have won another one, but I certainly wouldn't have won 6. And just spend time, reflect, find that purpose. What is it? And if it's different, hopefully it will be different, because we change year to year. We learn more. We're different people year to year. And so the motivation that's going to spark us will be different as well.
I love that. Give me some insight. Like, what were some of your motivations during those races and during those years, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, well, the first year it was a lot to give my best, but to also give an effort that I was really proud of, and that certainly came through. The next year, actually, I wanted to go back to just see if it was a fluke.
Did you? Was
that just like a once in a lifetime thing, and
right.
And that next year actually was the biggest winning margin that I had.
Wow.
And then it sort of became like, okay, I think I know how to do this, and let me just see if I can make sure that I'm ready to win this year's race, as opposed to trying to prepare to win last year's event. Because everybody can figure out how they would have won last year's race. And sure. I knew that each year was going to be different with different competitors, a different dynamic, different weather. Yes. And so my goal in the kind of like 3, 4, and 5 was to just be ready to manage whatever happened on that day. And to not try to put my template for success onto a situation that's going to look very different than it did before.
Yes.
And then the last year, 1995, the goal kind of came full circle, and it was to just give one more great performance, because I could tell that there was just a little bit more of me that I could bring into that race. Yep. Through all those experiences that had been building up for 11 Ironmans. And that's what I did. So it kind of, 1 and 6 were kind of like, they were the bookend victories that are the greatest stories of my racing there. And they also kind of ended up being very similar motivations.
Yes, that's interesting. I love that. Well, and as a couple more questions I want to ask. I could literally spend probably 4 hours with you just on this one thing. So maybe we'll have a take 2 if you'll allow me one of these days. But this will be kind of a random one out of the box. But nose breathing. Are you a fan of nose breathing while training and while running marathons? And for the listeners, they're probably like, what are you even talking about? But I've been reading a lot, and my friend who I'm doing this race with, we've been focused a lot on like nose breathing. I just want your thoughts on that versus mouth breathing combo. Yeah.
Well, apparently, there is some science to it that can help you get oxygen in and release CO2. And my son, who sort of is doing some triathlons, he actually practices that when he's like doing some stationary bike work and stuff. And I never did it. I was like, give me all the oxygen I can find.
Love it. Okay. Wide open.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. It's interesting running with doing nose breathing versus mouth breathing. Yeah. It's funny. I actually tend to sweat less, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. Again, I'm a baseball player, running a long race for the first time. So we'll see what happens. But I was very curious. That was my random question for the day.
I've seen not a lot, but some marathon runners, you'll see them, they're running 450 miles and their mouth is closed.
Wow, it's amazing.
But I think you have to have a certain structure so that you can actually get a lot of oxygen. Like not everybody's nose is the same, right? Some people, it's the canals are much smaller, so they just can't get in enough oxygen. But if you can breathe through your nose, it'll definitely help you regulate your breathing, and regulating your breathing sort of sets up how everything else works.
Yes, very true. Okay, interesting. Sorry, everyone. I had to ask that question. So, now, you've got a great coaching business. You're out speaking at different organizations as well, just telling your story, a lot of what we talked about, during our time here today. But, when you're, for your coaching business, working with these athletes, what's kind of the biggest area you're focused on with them? Is there one that sticks out? I know it's a variety of probably like nutrition and training and schedules and all that sort of stuff, but is there one area in particular that you find yourself spending a lot more time on than others?
My whole focus with the athletes that I coach at markallencoaching.com is to get them fit without burning them out, to think longevity and sustainability. And it's very easy to get somebody really fit really quick, very, very quickly, but it won't be sustainable. And so I spend a lot of my time explaining to people my methodology so that they understand that no, in 4 weeks they're not going to be race ready, that it's going to take, you're in it for the long haul if you're working with me, but you probably won't get injured. You're not going to get as burned out as you did with other coaches. Your results hopefully will be significantly better, because deep fitness is something that takes a lot of time to put inside. And it happens with just steady, consistent training, not intense, hard, crazy, wild stuff that shocks your body, which will, again, give you an immediate benefit, but it's not sustainable.
Yes.
It's sort of like you can think of how the water tables fill up. You can have a big storm on the surface, but only a little bit of it is going to slowly drip into the water table to fill it up if it's depleted. And our fitness is kind of like that. You can do some crazy stuff and it'll have an impact, but it won't sink in as really deep core fitness that you can draw on when you're racing.
Yes.
And then, of course, there is the mental side of competition and managing just day-to-day training and all that I don't even have to worry about bringing it up, because it comes up for people. And
yes,
I really feel like I can bring a good perspective to that, because for me it was such an important part of my success as an athlete. I was definitely not the guy that was just going to be obsessing about his numbers all day long. I would look at them, but I also knew that I had to figure out how to bring the best of me into it. And I worked consciously to develop that inner strength and that inner quiet and that willingness to surrender and to just respond to what was happening, as opposed to trying to control the whole situation.
Interesting. Do you with your athletes, and maybe you personally, what do you do to kind of like calm yourself? Is it the breathing? Is it meditation? Is it like something spiritual? Like how do you, and what do you teach to kind of bring yourself down a little bit?
Yeah, for me, like I said, I spend I go to a number of retreats each year with Brent Mukunda. He teaches ritual shamanism, and in those retreats, it really does help calm your nervous system down. It gives you an experience of having your mind be quiet. And one of the easiest ways for people to do that themselves is the two things. One, and Brant talks about this, just go out in nature. Go walk on a trail, go look at a mountaintop, go sit by a river, go look at the ocean, feel the sunlight, breathe in the air, whether it's warm or it's winter and it's cold. Yes. We as human beings are hardwired to feel good when we are in nature. And everybody knows this. You're in the office, you're frustrated with something, you can't get the answer, there's all these demands on you, and you just go time out, and you go for a walk outside for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And literally the second you go outside, there's this relief. And that's because we are hardwired to feel good in nature. So that's one simple thing. And then again, the other, like I said, Brant emphasizes that quieting your mind is so important. I tell people, and my athletes, in every single workout that you do, you can get your mind to be quiet. Like, something's going, you get to the intense part and you're like, frantic, and you don't know if you're going to be able to take it. And there it is. Just one simple conscious second where you, in essence, are stepping back from being so attached to it.
Yes.
And then you just relaunch fully engaged.
Yes. It's the simple things, right? That's what I love about a simple breath, a simple conscious breath, and a simple walk in nature.
Yeah.
It can change everything just in an instant.
I find the simpler a process is to do over and over and over again, the more powerful it's going to be in the end. And you know this, like for yourself in running, if you do one run, you'll come back and you'll feel good. Wow, I went for a run, and you were outside, and you were breathing and sweating. But 1,000 runs, just putting one foot in front of the other, 1,000 runs will completely transform your life. It'll change the composition of your body, your health. It'll give you better mental acuity. You'll just feel good. And so it's doing those simple things over and over and over, those uncomplicated things that don't require us to be necessarily thinking.
Yes. That
really empower us. And in business, we know this too, like you're working on something and you can't come up with the answer, and your logical brain is ready to blow a circuit, right?
Yes.
And then you go somewhere, and for a lot of people, it's actually when they're driving, their mind is just sort of drifting. They're not consciously working on that thing, and all of a sudden the insight comes. Einstein said some of his greatest insights came when he was riding his bicycle. So if you want to be a genius, ride your bike.
I love that. Companies and athletes around the world, go purchase a bike.
Yeah.
Hop on and start pedaling.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, and I know we're kind of up on our time, and just want to be aware of that. And I just can't thank you enough. I'm going to put links to all, markallencoaching.com, markallenspeaking.com. I was watching some of your videos just of you speaking at different corporations. I mean, as all the listeners, as you're listening today and perhaps watching on this video on YouTube, but you start understanding the impact that you could have in a corporate environment as well, let alone with the athletes that you're working with today. So this message has just been awesome, Mark. Just awesome. And I truly can't thank you enough for being with me today and sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Great. My pleasure. Anytime. Would love to come back again.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes or Stitcher and give us a rating or review. And as always, please don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and stay in touch. Have a fabulous rest of your day.